Welcome everyone to the 2022 Changemakers Summit, Emotional Labor at Work. This year is our second annual summit dedicated to those in the UCLA community who champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations. We're so excited to have you join us as we welcome and continue to explore the topic of emotional labor. My name is David Sun, and my pronouns are he, him, his. For visual description, I have brown hair and I'm wearing a white shirt with a navy blue blazer. I serve as the Interim Senior Director for Diversity Programs and Initiatives, and I'm a member of the planning team that's organized our virtual summit. If you would like, please introduce yourself in the chat and rename yourself to include your graduation year and pronouns. As a means to make this event accessible, we'll be utilizing the Zoom live transcription. You can view the transcription by selecting View Full Transcription in the live transcript menu of your Zoom toolbar. To begin, I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. UCLA acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Tongmangnar, Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. As a land grant institution, we pay our respects to Honuk Vetan, our ancestors, Ahihiram, elders, and Iyohinkem, our relatives, past, present, and emerging. We understand that many of you today may be participating from different parts of the country. So if you're interested in learning more about what native lands you're currently occupying, please visit the link in the chat. We would also like to thank UCLA Health for their generous support of our summit. As the presenting sponsor of this week, we are thrilled to be partnering with their organization. You can learn more about their diversity and equity efforts in the link in the chat. We also want to acknowledge the sustaining donors to the UCLA Alumni Association, whose donations make programs like the summit possible. I would like to remind our guests that you will receive an email from us every morning with the daily schedule and the links to the virtual sessions. If you somehow aren't getting our emails, you'll find session information on the summit schedule website as well. We encourage you to join UCLA One Changemakers Summit group to continue the conversations in between the sessions. And we hope you'll connect with other participants and share best practices and experiences in your organizations. And now I'm excited to introduce the facilitator of today's panel, Paco Ratana. For 30 years, Paco Ratana has been serving the vulnerable youth and marginalized communities in Los Angeles. As a recognized mental health expert and vice president of programs at Wellness, he is responsible for all clinical programs, including strategic planning, program evaluation, and training in support of Wellness's mission to provide quality mental health services. He also promotes early intervention and ensuring easy access for a community in great need by initiating and implementing program changes to meet new funding streams for innovative prevention programs. Please welcome our facilitator for this panel, Paco Ratana. And I'm going to go ahead and share our presentation slides now.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for that warm introduction, and good afternoon. It is officially afternoon on a beautiful sunny day, and I want to thank the participants that are joining us. I know that it's a busy day. All of you are coming in, just leaning into an incredible conversation that we're going to have with these incredible people. So again, thank you for joining us in the sacred space. Again, good afternoon. My name is Paco Retana. My gender pronoun is he, him, or él. And my visual description, I'm wearing a black vest. I got some glasses. I got a white shirt on, and I'm smiling because I am very blessed to be around. I'm to Henry and Aurea, I consider dear friends, and I'm hoping that I become also a good friend with John Ho now. So thank you again for being here in this space. So we're going to today's Changemakers Summit topic is on emotional. It's been on emotional labor, and the session for today is caring for community caretakers. And no doubt these individuals are change makers. They're leaders. They're subject matter experts. They're in on it. They're boots on the ground. In addition to leading their organizations with their team. So I'm really blessed to be here and lift them up. The session will examine the unique and nuanced challenges around staff burnout from the pandemic on leaders of nonprofit organizations dedicated to serving their communities' mental health and wellness. And I cannot, again, underscore the leadership that they've had, and they're all Bruin. So this is a great start off. I will just, our hopes here and strategies and our hopes during this discussion is to identify some strategies and resources to address the needs that are affecting our communities. Then we're going to identify areas of gaps and support measures that are still needed, ways to help and support within an organization and from our key stakeholders, and just resources and initiatives that incorporate from feedback to mitigate these pressures. I hope to have an organic conversation with the panelists and go from there. So I want to also just begin by defining emotional labor. And the way we focus on it is that the management of one's feelings and emotions in accordance with organizationally defined rules and guidelines, largely present, but often invisible in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our keynote speaker yesterday was fabulous, and she did a great opening event, went on to further explain emotional labor as emotional labor is emotion management and life management combined. It is the unpaid, invisible work we do to keep those around us comfortable and happy, especially during these last 2 years. This has definitely been my experience. And when do I say things? When do I back up? When do I say something that's going to be, I believe, a value, an important item to discuss? And sometimes I got to pull back because of intersectionality items that I'm maybe worried about being vulnerable, for example. So we want to recognize and address emotional labor in the workplace. It's just not easy. Balancing the professional and personal nature of showing up and advocating for yourself and others during this intensive process. So for example, for me, I'm thinking, how do I really help the staff that we're working with, who are essential workers, to go back in the community and embrace a hybrid model while we're providing in-person services has been a challenge, but also a team approach in doing that. So before I start off with the questions really quickly, I just wanted to pepper in there with some what we call some flashpoints of what has happened the last 2 years. And they're not, one is March 2020, we go into a shelter in place. Governor Newsom stay-at-home orders is implemented. People are very sick, are dying, are affecting our BIPOC, most marginalized communities. Economic hardship, inequities are heightened. Mental health issues regarding social isolation, anxiety, depression, academic institutions shut down. We have a debate across the country with mask versus no mask. It's just a devastating impact to navigate through. And all of the panelists are in the middle of this, and are also, how do you manage an organization that embraces these inequities that are occurring and at the same time trying to serve your community? So in addition to that, in March 2020, anti-Asian violence comes out and emerges through number 45, the highest office held in the country, and calls it a Chinese virus. So an example of, again, another flashpoint that happens in the last 2 years that just complicates things at a whole different level. And then finally, in May, we have the killing of George Floyd, which inspires an international movement really about just the inequities on and police violence towards, in this case, with our African-American community. So I think it was important to share these points with all of you. And thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each panelist and then ask the particular question to them. And then I'll start off with their bio and then ask the question. So I'm going to start off with Henry Bettis. Henry there you go. Thank you. Henry is currently the Associate Director of the Inner City Struggle, leading campaign and strategy development for the organization. He is a leader in several local, statewide social justice alliances and coalitions with deep knowledge around base building, leadership, development, college access, school climate, and community school issues. He's a father, he's a husband, a son, he's a beautiful person, and he leans into his leadership role. So Henry, thank you for being here. I'm going to ask you the first question, and that is, what have you observed as the primary changes to your staff needs during the pandemic as compared to it before?
Great. Thank you, Paco. I also want to thank David and thank my fellow panelists and everyone that's tuned into this webinar. Thank you all for allowing me to share space with all of you. Like Paco said, my name is Henry Perez. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Inner City Struggle. Very quickly, Inner City Struggle is a 28-year-old community organization that builds community power by organizing youth, young adults, and parents in East Los Angeles in order to win policy changes that transform systems to be equitable and just and provide our communities with the resources that we need to thrive and be successful. So something that I think is important to lift up is that our staff, we have a staff of close to 30 individuals, and they're made up of individuals from the same communities that we serve. Almost our entire staff come from communities like East Los Angeles, the Southeast Los Angeles area, and South Los Angeles as well. Since they come from very low-income, poor families and households themselves, they face many of the same issues that our members and our communities face. Often they have family members that are struggling with the same issues that we are organizing to address. Having said that, the pandemic definitely exacerbated those issues and surfaced some new ones that we had to confront, such as having family members that were laid off or suffered a loss of income, family members that couldn't pay bills, including rent, and therefore facing eviction. That was not uncommon among our staff over the past 2 years of the pandemic. And although exacerbated, this like economic insecurity, housing insecurity is something that our communities have faced and endured way before the pandemic. But now you add a health crisis on top of that, right? In a community made up, kind of like you mentioned, Paco, of frontline essential workers that did not have like the privilege of working from home, the virus really ravaged our community. The east side of Los Angeles was a national epicenter of the pandemic, having among the highest rate of infections and the highest rates of COVID-related deaths in the country. Our community, the east side, actually received national attention for having mortuaries that couldn't keep up with the amount of people in our community that were dying of COVID. Sadly, we had several staff members that lost loved ones during the pandemic. And one of the biggest challenges that our staff faced during the pandemic was really needing to be there and be present for our members and our community, right, that we are hired to serve, while those issues were simultaneously hitting them and their families, and they were hitting really close to home for them. That really took a toll on our staff early on during the pandemic, and it still continues to now. You know, although the privilege of our country, state, county, and our city, you know, it may feel like the pandemic for them is subsiding. For our more vulnerable communities, there is still a long road of recovery ahead. Our communities are still need to recuperate lost income, overcoming debt, and the struggle to really stay housed in their communities. That continues for our communities, and that includes our very own staff members. So that has been like one of the biggest changes that we have seen due to the pandemic.
Henry, thank you so much for that comprehensive response. And I heard your team is with folks, your staff is with lived experience, and with that is such a valuable resource to have and you lifting up how your own staff were paralleling with the same issues that the community was experiencing. So thank you for that response. So I'm gonna move on to, I'm gonna ask Aurea Montes Rodriguez, una amiga, a friend as well. And she's the executive vice president of the Community Coalition, has worked at the organization for more than 20 years. She's born in Mexico and raised in South LA. She developed a passion for creating change at the local level. Aurea has been a key leader responsible for building the organization's youth programs to fight for educational equity, leading efforts to keep the children in family care and out of the foster care system, helping to build organizing capacity in South LA, and leading capital campaign to transform the organization's headquarters into a state-of-the-art community hub for community organizing. And I applaud both Aurea and including also with Henry's new buildings that they have there that are very just reflective of the need for the community. So Aurea, thank you so much for being here. My question to you, Aurea, is during the pandemic and the work that you've been doing with your staff and then your leadership, what major gaps, if any, do you personally see between the needs that staff have expressed and what the organization is currently able to provide them? Thank you.
Thank you, Paco. So, and thank you for that introduction. I'm so honored to be here with fellow alumni that are doing incredible work and important work during one of the most historic times in our lifetime. And so thank you all for all that you do. Just a little bit more about Community Coalition before I go into the gaps and what we are able to do for our staff around their social emotional labor needs. You know, Community Coalition was actually founded 30 years ago to deal with the impacts of the crack cocaine epidemic. And from the very beginning, our founder was looking at the root causes that led to the crack epidemic, the crack cocaine epidemic, which was public and private disinvestment in South Los Angeles, decades of private and public disinvestment. And that's really important because our founders knew that there needed to be a permanent vehicle that engaged everyday people, both adults and young people, Black and Brown, who, you know, are the residents that make up South Los Angeles, in developing solutions that could both repair some of the harm that was caused, including mass incarceration, the breakup of families, the disinvestment in our public education system, and for residents to put forward solutions that impact the quality of life, but also that can lead to transformation to build a healthy, thriving community. And I share that background because 30 years later, very much like Inner City Struggle, Community Coalition continues to organize residents, including young people. We focus on civic engagement work and arts and culture as a way of building people and political power. And, you know, the pandemic for us was a harsh reminder of the origin of Community Coalition. And we were very clear that the inequities that we have seen, you know, in South Los Angeles were going to be exacerbated. And when we got word that were going to begin to shut down, we quickly moved forward to ensure that all of our staff could have the technology, the education, and the ability to connect remotely. And even though we were told initially that the closure was going to be for 2 weeks, we had a sense that, you know, if the declaration by the World Health Organization was a pandemic, that this was actually going to that it was going to last longer, and that we as an outward facing organization, we're going to have to pivot to push the LAUSD, the city, and the county to address the inequities that some of the interventionists who were out in the field before they knew about PPE supplies, that were out in the community really addressing the needs of the community when we didn't have access to basic supplies because everything closed, right? Whether we're talking about, about cleaning supplies, toilet paper was a big thing, but food, basic foods and medicines that our community needed. And so we pivoted to do the advocacy side, but our folks who have never done direct service provision also said, if South LA residents have been stepping up for South Los Angeles for 3 decades and more, we have to figure out how to step up for South LA residents and families now. And so we pivoted to provide mutual aid for families. And I share that because providing mutual aid during the pandemic to families, as Henry said, had a direct impact on the lives of our staff, both what they were seeing in their homes, what they had to see day after day, our families experience, and what they were seeing happening in the larger community, whether we're talking about Los Angeles or when the murder of George Floyd happened, the national protest, right? And so I think that what we have done well as an organization is checking in with our staff, really trying to build trust to say, we don't expect that you can carry all of this work and be frontline essential workers in our community without having the support that you need. And so, we started brown bag lunches where we brought in mental health professionals to talk about trauma and mental health. We built up a fund so that individuals who wanted to come together in affinity spaces as parents, as African-American staff, as people who were living alone in their homes could have spaces to do group sessions or therapy. And then we also identified therapists outside of our Kaiser benefits because people were struggling to access mental health services to offer one-on-one therapy for people who were beginning to experience mental health needs or social emotional crisis, because that did happen within our staff. And it happened with the residents and families that we work with, but our staff members, in some cases were also impacted. And then lastly, we did have a tragedy in our staff. We did have a staff member who passed away suddenly and unexpectedly at the beginning of this year, not due to COVID, but during the pandemic. And that was a major blow to our organization, because we do a lot of work to build camaraderie in our team, and had a lot of love for this individual. And so we had to create space both internally and externally for people to have time to grieve the loss. And we had to say to our funders and our allies and the community, we actually need time as staff also to grieve the loss, and we want to grieve with the community, but don't expect that we can carry on with the work as usual. So those are some of the things that we've had to do. Things that we have not been able to get to in our remote and hybrid work is what may become more permanent changes. So looking at, shorter work weeks, which is, something that has been brought up, or looking at whether some positions will continue to be permanently remote. Those are 2 examples. And so I'll pause there.
Thank you, Aurea. So exciting. As your community coalition transforming to building just these healthier communities, and definitely most outward facing organization. And the one thing that I heard that you said, and I walked away feeling like, or I'm here feeling the presence, that is how you all stepped up with mutual aid for families. And to meet the needs of the community, and also how in this emotional labor of love, and how you all rallied around your staff to manage their own issues and how they were feeling about the impact of their own losses that they were experiencing. And the love that I can visually see the brown bag lunches that you had, and bringing in wellness or mental health providers to utilizing a trauma-informed lens to help support them. So that is awesome. And then the next steps that the Coco wants to do with hybrid models, et cetera. So that was really very helpful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I am now excited to introduce John Ho Song. And John Ho Song is the Executive Director of Koreatown Youth and Community Center. It is a nonprofit organization that serves the recently immigrated and economically disadvantaged youth and families of the multicultural Koreatown community. Mr. Song began with KYCC, as it is known, in 1985 and has served as the Executive Director since 1998. He currently oversees a diverse workforce of over 150 employees with annual operating budget of over 14 million. For 47 years, KYCC has been the leading multi-service provider in Koreatown, offering a continuum of services that include affordable housing, education, financial education, environmental services, and mental health counseling. KYCC's multiple programs are housed at 8 different sites across central Los Angeles. And John Ho, I was not aware of your particular center, and I was able to look at your annual report. So I was very impressed, and the work that that you guys are doing in your community. So it's great. So I want to welcome John Ho to the space. And I have a question for John Ho, and that is, especially as an executive director, and as you're balancing what these last 2 years has been, what's been your message to your organization's mission to serve the community while keeping your employees safety as a priority, right? So you're managing safety, that's a priority. What kind of message have you done in your organization to uplift that?
Thank you for the invitation. My name is John Ho Song, Executive Director of KYCC. Paco did a wonderful job of describing who we are and what we do, so I don't have to repeat that. During the past 2 years, one of the things that we really did well as an organization, our HR department really led the way of communicating very frequently on a weekly basis to staff about the updates, pandemic updates, COVID updates, and all the safety protocols. One real lessons learned was how important it was for us to build a team as a whole. So it wasn't about just our HR department, but all different units and divisions working together to support one another's work. And one thing that I saw within our team was the leaders, the managers, and the directors visiting different sites. We have 8 different service locations on a regular basis and having conversations with our staff to identify their needs. What can we do to help them through this process? As Henry has mentioned in the beginning, we also realized that many of our staff and the people that we work with are just like our clients. Entry-level staff have a lot of needs, and we didn't know how to separate that in the beginning. But as we realized that we had to fulfill not only the clients that we serve, but also the staff. And during this time, there were a lot of organizational lessons to learn on our part.
John Ho, thank you for that response. You reminded me of, there's a Mayan poem that means en la quec, which means you are my other me, or in Spanish, tú eres mi otro yo. And the fact that you guys focus on your staff, which means your community, was very, very beautiful, and how your team as a whole focused on, as working together, identifying needs and making sure that you were forward facing and making sure that your staff are safe. I love the weekly communications. In this case, I would imagine that all organizations were over communicating to just make sure that staff are wearing their PPEs, for example, and managing and hitting the levers of the safety protocol. So, which means continuing to serve the community. So thank you for that response. I'm gonna move on to a question that is multiple questions here, but I'm gonna focus and again in the skill base of as we talk about emotional labor and the feelings that at sometimes that come up, especially during the country's social justice unrest has been occurring, and all the work that you all have been doing, and how sometimes our staff or ourselves are invisible in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion and lifting this up. So I'm wondering if I'm going to ask Henry here, what was your organization's commitment? And I heard John speak, and you've addressed it a little bit about this as well, on creating a healthy, ready culture, whether you had to implement work health safety policies for your employees and community. And I will share that I was very blessed to be part of bringing back your staff in a healing circle process. And I thought that was very powerful, like what Aurea did with her staff, bringing in folks who are culturally responsive to the needs of your staff that reflect the community. So I'm wondering if you can lift that particular moment up, or something that comes to mind of what ICS has been doing to build this healthy, ready culture, because we're not out of the pandemic, but that's where we're at. And especially that you addressed the issues. That was very powerful about the mortuaries being, there's no lack of space during this time. So thank you, Henry.
Got it, Paco. Thank you. And the question is for our staff in particular, right? Yeah. So definitely some of the practices that we implemented during the past couple of years. First of all, I think we really needed to listen to our staff, right? Really get their voices to really understand what their needs were. So we conducted several surveys over the last couple of years so that we could really, better understand what their needs were during this time. Not only while they were working from home, but also as we were preparing to return staff back to the office, the headquarters, in a hybrid model, but we were bringing them back. And we understood that there was going to be a lot of anxiety with returning back to the office. Just like I mentioned in the beginning, we have staff members that had families that were impacted by COVID, that were at higher risk of getting COVID or of dying from COVID. So we knew that there was a lot of anxiety among our staff in returning. So we wanted to make sure that we took that into consideration and understood how do we meet those needs while they were at home and when they were going to return. While they were at home, we also wanted to make things as comfortable for them as possible. So we offered pretty much all our staff work from home stipends that they were able to utilize for whatever needs they had while they were working at home. Some of our staff used them for desks, for better chairs, for just technology equipment that made their work from home environment more comfortable, more conducive. We also did small things like delivering care packages to our staff. And these care packages had teas and essential oils and snacks that we send regularly so that they could enjoy something, right? A token of our appreciation and understanding of everything that they were dealing with. I think one of the points that Aurea mentioned which was shortened work weeks. And that is something that we would possibly discuss into the future for ourselves at Inner City Struggle. But during the pandemic, we implemented something called Respite Days. And we offered respite days, like regular respite days for our staff. And it was kind of like almost every other Friday, they had respite days. And a couple of times we even had like a full respite weeks. And this was just the opportunity for our staff to have some of that space to take care of their own needs, take care of the needs of their families, to get just some of that mental and emotional breathers, right? While, when they weren't able to have it when they were working. The last one I was going to touch on, Paco, that you mentioned was the in-person talking circles that we had with our staff, and you were so grateful in coming to facilitate. But this was an opportunity for them to really share how they were doing and how they were feeling, and really to support one another and reconnect with one another before coming back on a hybrid schedule to our headquarters.
Thank you, Henry. Respite days, even the word sounds calming, especially when it's coming from you, Henry, and how you're, the care package. What a beautiful gesture for your, and of course we all wish we could, that care package would perhaps include a vacation somewhere, right? But it's the thoughtfulness, it's that really lifts up the staff during this time. So I appreciate that response. I'm going to go off the script a little bit for a second, and I'm going to ask Aurea a question about, as a leader, how have you managed through this with your own family, with your own friends, your own worries? How have you been able to manage through this last 2 years and keep yourself hopeful as someone with lived experience from South LA, giving back to your community? So just if you can help me understand how you did that. I'll take notes too.
Thank you, Paco. I love everything that Henry said. And, we had similar approaches with our staff, including doing things for the first time in the 30-year history of the organization, like closing down for an entire week and paying folks to rest and recover. For me personally, this has been one of the most challenging times in my 20-year history in the organization. And, I think for me, it has helped that I have 3 children and married, and including 2 teenagers. So really had to think about their emotional well-being and how to develop healthy practices. And 2 things that stand out to me is, I've had healthy practices, like I'm a yogi, and so I practice yoga. I also am a very social person. And so during in the last 2 years, I really committed to my yoga practice virtually. And so learning a new way of taking care of myself. I also picked up yard work. So the way I could get alone time from my beautiful children and husband was actually being out in the yard, digging weeds out of my lawn, like actual physical work to make my front yard look better. And regular time at the beach every Sunday morning. Whoever wants to join me when I wake up, if they're ready, can join me on walks on the beach. And so those are things that I did to have me time, Aurea time. And they've made a big difference. In terms of like the social, part of what I think we've all learned is that we have to be physically distanced not socially distanced. And I really take that to heart, especially as we continue to be in a period where, surges can change things dramatically. And so, we've had celebrations, both family and with friends, that are virtual, and have really made those interactive, like had actual games and, ways for us to go a little bit deeper. And it's usually the younger people that can come up with all the interactive games, but really embracing, interaction in a virtual or outdoor, space with safety measures, and then also weighing risk and benefit, right? And so in the periods where, we're all able to access the vaccine and be boosted, utilizing those periods to reconnect in a meaningful way with people that, for me specifically, that I love. So whether it's family members or friends, and seeing that as a part of, being my whole self during a pandemic, and sharing those moments with our staff and with allies to normalize that we have to take care of ourselves, so that we can then be of service to others, including family members.
Well said, Aurea. Thank you. I can see just the love for your family as well as yourself. I love Aurea time, and I think a lot of us as individuals of color in our work, we often lose sight of that. And the fact that you're getting grounded with yoga or walking on a beach on a Sunday, every Sunday consistently, is beautiful, because it just brings some traditional ritual stuff to you. So thank you for responding and being vulnerable in that with the question. John Ho, I was thinking about, again, you've been a leader in your organization for very dedicated, loyal leader to your dedication. And last year, like Aurea said, is probably one of the challenging times for her as a leader. What have been lessons learned for you in this time? Is there anything that you would have done different? Is there something that you would have had an opportunity to do, or what did you do that just you're very proud of yourself, and that you said, I'm going to do this, I would do it again, hopefully not in a particular pandemic again, but what are your lessons learned to us that you can share with us?
We as an organization has gone through a riot back in 1992. And this year marks 30th anniversary come April 29th.
That's right.
And one of the lessons learned from that particular event 30 years ago is that organization has to learn how to be flexible and creative and pivot very quickly. At that time, I remember us requesting all of our funders, government funders especially, for us to do something more to meet the needs of the community. Our community was in a place where they needed emergency assistance, not necessarily direct use services, for example, or recreation or case management services. So we had to learn how to pivot. And from that experience, I think we did something very similar. When the directors got together, what is it that we could do now, the people, to serve our community better? And we made that very similar choice and asked our funders to we could delay some of the work requirements that we had. And government funders were wonderful at this time. I don't think they take enough credit. They really provided us with flexibility and support during these times so that we could pivot and we could do other things that our community needed us to do, like food delivery. We had over 12,000 meal distribution during this time. Help with small business, more than 400 small businesses with loan and grant applications. EDD claims, brought back about $2 million of EDD claims. So we were able to do things that community was asking for. So one of the big lessons learned is that with 30 years ago experience, we were able to pivot very quickly. And the bigger lessons learned, I think, has to do with when you do good and when you do well, people will support your work. One thing that we are very grateful for to all of our staff and to all the supporters is that we were able to sustain all of our employees during this time. We actually increased our staff by about 15%. We had overwhelming volunteers who wanted to be part of our work. We had overwhelming support from our funders so that we could be creative and we could serve the community best as we can during this time. So that's one big organizational lesson.
Paco, can I add to Jung-Ho? Because this is a big one that I've been reflecting on. You know, we did have a hybrid reopening in December, and some of our folks were impacted by breakthrough cases. And, you know, we have so many safety measures in place that our HR department and our admin team have put in place. We, as leadership, we had to recognize at that time that, you know, to protect our staff, we had to, as Jung-Ho said, be really flexible and adaptive, and also reflect on when we might make mistakes and might need to call in outside support to help us figure out, because this is uncharted territory. And so I just wanted to say that, because for me as a leader, like, you know, having the conversations with our staff and saying, maybe we have to slow down, maybe we have to find another way, you know, similar to the period right before the 1992 uprising and the response during the crisis, and again in the 94 earthquake. I can only imagine that, you know, that kind of vulnerability as leaders. And, you know, we've had some transitions for folks who are like, you know, seeing what's happening around the movement in support of Black lives, but the continued killings of Black, you know, brothers and sisters, you know, makes it so that at this time, I can't continue to do the work that I'm doing at Community Coalition and supporting people when they want to make a transition to do another type of work that allows them to create some separation. Like having those difficult conversations has also been a part of this work. And I just want to lift that up because it's been true for us in South LA at Community Coalition.
Thank you, Ariane. Thank you for lifting up Jung-Ho's response. I love the importance of pivot and flexibility, and you do it with grace, humility, and intentionality to just create the impact that your missions all are doing. I want to honor. We have a few minutes left. There's the questions from the audience, so I want to go ahead and ask a few of those, and I will do my best here to. We can maybe try to give a quick response, but it's little, these are, and you'll see. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask the first one. How does each organization take into account and acknowledge the extra emotional labor that women typically perform in their workspace? Knowing that there are some masculinity in the space at this point, anyone can jump in there. Again, how does your organization take into account, acknowledge the extra emotional labor that women typically perform in the workspace?
I'm happy to start. You know, I think the younger generation of women in our organization they've been vocal about, you know, the extra work that that women are doing at Community Coalition. We have had affinity groups. We haven't yet started, the women's collective, but women have asked for it. And, we have had young women actually during Women's History Month coming and providing, a small gift to all of the staff and women in our leadership, lifting up not just internally the role of women, but the role of women leading, across the country. And so having those conversations explicitly.
Thank you, Aurea.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that question. I mean, I think we definitely could do better, but I think our organization is made up of like super majority women of color, right, that make up our organization. I think our leadership is pretty much all entirely, actually, with the exception of me, like the senior leadership is entirely women. And I think definitely understanding, the roles that that women play in the organization. And I know oftentimes, not only women, but some of the men that are juggling, family life and work life. I think being very intentional about being patient and flexible and supportive in that realm is super important. Yeah, so I think those are some things that come to mind for me.
Thank you, Henry. Go ahead, John.
Okay, also with KYCC, we did realize very early on to support many of the families, especially with childcare from our staff. We provide as much as we can for the flexible scheduling for the parents, especially for women. And during this time also, we created DEI committee. And that's going on very strong right now with the bringing on, we feel the very important consultants. And that has become part of our organizational work plan for the next 2 years as one of the priorities.
Thank you, John Ho. I'm going to entertain one last question, and this will be very specific about our resources. So the question says, we are all at the time that we should utilize mental health services, and we certainly need it, but it feels so hard to do so. Could you provide a few concrete resources, please, or advise on what to do when it feels like these resources require so many in-track steps to access them?
I'll jump in there. And when Aurea was talking about some of the steps that they were doing in their staff, I was like, wow, that's great. Like, I applaud all those steps, because when I was thinking about gaps, right, Paco, I was thinking that that's kind of one of the bigger gaps that we have confronted here at Inner City Struggle is being able to support our staff members as much to the extent that we would like to around mental health services. Our staff members are definitely bringing that up. They are definitely bringing up the need, the desire to have more accessible mental health services, right? And like quality and culturally like responsive mental health services. As an organization, we haven't been able to find the resources to offer that in-house in our organization to the extent that we would like to, right? But we have been able to do it in a limited extent by bringing people like you, Paco, to meet with staff members that have expressed the need to meet with mental health coaches, therapists, or counselors. But it's a real need. I know that our insurances don't make it easy to access those resources, right? I know from myself, just when I try to access it, how difficult, challenging it was. You know, they give you, like, you have to go to a website, they give you like a list of, like a long list of people that are in their network. And I remember calling like about 10 of them, and it was like no answer, or I'm full, I don't have time for another person, before I finally found someone. And then when I found someone, they weren't that great. And I was really disappointed. And it's kind of like, okay, I got to start over again. Something that we have been able to do is partner with university programs like MSW programs. And we have utilized those programs more for our members, for our youth members, right? But for our staff, it's definitely a gap that we need to meet.
I want to, man, I can just keep going, but I want to honor people's times. In Lakek, to all of you, if you're blessed, we're blessed. If you're successful, we're successful. And if you're in pain, we're in pain. And I walk away that blessings to all of you. Your sacredness came out, your professionalism, your integrity, your leadership, your ability to have these crucial conversations, and the emotional labor behind this, and having to walk this careful line at times. So I want to thank Henry Perez, Aurea Montes Rodriguez, and John Hosong for your time and your wisdom imparting to us. So I'm going to pivot over to David to close this up.
Thanks so much, Paco. And absolutely want to reiterate a huge thank you to our panelists. I've got some few other folks to thank as well. But again, really appreciative of all the amazing conversation we've had today, and for all of you really just sharing and lending us your expertise about how you not only support the community, but also support the ones who are supporting the community as well. In addition to that, we'd really like to give a special thanks to President Drake, D'Artagnan Scorza and Ann Wang, Jen Wells, Dr. Julie Saina, our amazing alumni volunteers who've been leading sessions and participating in this really fantastic discussion. Definitely to our sustaining donors, because without you, programs like this would not be possible. To the UCLA Alumni Board of Directors for making diversity a focus in their strategic planning. And finally, our UCLA alumni staff, our ACE, our care team, and our DPI team. Thank you so much for organizing this and for really joining us today. I'd like to end this session by noting that we will be sending out a follow-up information to all of our registered guests with a recording of this session, as well as some additional resources to all of the Q&As that we did not get to answer today. I'll be sure to reach out to the panelists and provide some follow-up information with that as well. And with that, I would just like to say, last but not least, thank you to UCLA Health for being an amazing sponsor and partner in this event. And lastly, thank you to everyone who's joining us for Summit. So excited to have you join us again this year, and to continue off into our next day. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us as well at diversity@alumni.ucla.edu. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you all, and have a wonderful day. Go Bruins.